you doing, Timo?
Hi, John. Good.
I'm going to go live in a second here.
Sure.
All right. I'm just going to make folks panelists as long as they're well behaved as they come in. And it's nice to see you, Timo. Taylor, you're now a panelist. We'll start in just a few minutes. All right, just setting things up. And that looks good. Looks like we have some people watching on YouTube, and this will go to the YouTube channel when we're done. How you doing, Timo? Taylor?
Good, thanks.
What would you like to talk about today, Timo?
Well, actually, Tomo asked me to join today, so it's the first time for me, and so I have really no idea what I should be talking about, or asking about. So we're basically, as a company, we are learning about the technology. So I'm completely a newcomer. So we are IoT company. I don't know if Tomo mentioned last time when he joined last week. We are Japanese-based IoT company, and actually have several verticals in Japan, like energy and supply chain and telecom and finance. So
yeah, he was a great person to be on the call, and we enjoyed talking to him.
excellent.
So please pass on our best.
I will. Thanks.
We'll just start in a few minutes, and like there's some folks watching. And while we're waiting, Timo, why don't you go ahead and ask, what are your thoughts and what would you like to know? This Q&A, this office hours, sometimes there'll be tons of people, sometimes maybe not so many. It doesn't really matter. The whole purpose is so that people who want to get involved with the community have their questions answered, on a weekly basis.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, I don't know what I should ask at this stage. But I think I saw some kind of discussion with where Joe, Brian, they had some discussion about the EE-ASPEC network, kind of moving towards the kind of decentralized storage networks and accommodate many blockchains where Ethereum would be, very suitable for this type of role. So, do you have kind of any generic view on this? Additionally, what Joe already kind of mentioned, just at the very generic level.
Yeah. Would you like to know about? We can talk about the baseline pattern. We've done that a couple of times. There's good content out there on the web about what patterns make sense for baselining. What requirements you'd want to be looking for in a project to know that the baseline pattern is a good one, and importantly, when it's not a good pattern. In IoT, the IoT is a particularly good place to talk about that, because there are lots of places where you want to put even a baseline pattern in IoT, depending on what problem you're trying to solve. I don't know. Everybody in blockchain land seems to talk about use cases. 5 years I've been hearing the word use cases. What's your use case? And then somebody will say trade finance, and I'm like, that's not a use case. That's a topic, right? Or IoT, and I'm like, yes, also a topic, right? Tell me what your use is. That is, more importantly, what is your problem? What problem are you trying to solve? Who is the person who's experiencing this problem? Why do they want to lose their minds every day because the problem is happening to them? And then what tools do we have to apply to fix the problem or to make it suck less for them, right? That's, to me, a use case. So from that perspective, maybe we can talk about, it'd be fun actually to have a conversation today just about that. What are the kinds of problems you're seeing in that space that, and maybe we can have a meeting of the minds where we say, hey, that's a problem. Oh, that's not really a good problem for baseline. No, that's a problem, and that is a good problem for baseline.
My understanding at the very basic level about baseline is I think it's about creating proofs and then tokenizing them. Is this accurate or correct? Or?
Yeah. So the essential pattern, I find it to be very simple. Boringly simple, right? You've got some system of record, some database or memory system that has memory, and you have another one. Oh, do we lose Timo? Hey, Dermot.
Hey, how you doing? Sorry, I'm fighting with my internet, so hopefully you can hear.
Yeah, your connection's pretty weak, but.
I'm just going back now because I think it's something to do with my work computer and the VPN fighting with my internet. So I'm actually just changing onto my Mac.
No worries.
And
we'll see you there.
And communicate better then.
Right on. So Timo, you're back?
Yes.
Awesome. And promoting some folks to panelists who are joining. So Timo, where did I lose you?
At the very beginning. So baseline is about creating proofs and then tokenizing them. That's kind of, I lost you after that.
Yeah. So the simple pattern for baseline, and then maybe we can talk about IoT, again, IoT problems that seem to fit that, would be, you have typically a state machine, right? Let's call it that. I like to, that sounds pretty techy, but it is a complete box, right? It's a box around the whole thing, right? Which is any state machine that is a thing that says my state is this and now my state is that. That involves memory or business logic that needs to persist. These are the things that are on the edges, right? So SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle, but also an IoT device, a Raspberry Pi, Mongo database. These are all state machines, right? Or
Yes.
serve them. And in those cases, you want some from time to time. From time to time. By the way, everybody, this is the baseline protocol office hours number whatever. I'm starting to lose track, and we do this every Wednesday at noon U.S. Eastern time. So keep an eye on the baseline community calendar, or just join the community at https baseline-protocol.org. Get on the Slack, get on the Discord, get on the different channels, read the docs, and keep an eye on the calendar for upcoming events. We have 3 regular events: SSC, which is our steering committee, TSC, which is our technical steering committee, and 11 members that are voted in by contributors, and then these office hours. And then we have other meetings on an ad hoc basis. Almost all of them are publicly distributed, so we have full transparency. This is an open source public domain project that is involving now, well, there were 14 companies involved in the original press release, and now there's, I can't even count how many companies are involved. Actually, I can count. It's like between 400 and 500 at this point. So back to the conversation. We thought today we might talk a little bit about IoT because Timo had some interesting questions about it, and promoting somebody to panelists there. So the question is, what is how does the baseline pattern work, and what might we use that for in an IoT environment, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the pattern is, again, state machine 1, 2, 3, 4. In particular, when they are controlled by legally separate entities, right? If you're all in one company, if you have everything that you needs to be consistent with each other is in one company or one organization, or you can set up an organization for that, then you don't really need blockchain at all. And you might not even need baseline, although you could use the baseline pattern in some ways. But really the baseline goes a long way at trying to set up and make it possible for legally separate entities who don't necessarily trust each other to maintain consistency of record keeping between them without and using a always on state machine, the public mainnet, in such a way that you're not giving away any secrets about your activities, your business relationships, your transactions, etc. Which is a neat trick, right? Because a public blockchain is a public ledger that anybody could get a hold of and analyze for as long as they like. So first rule of baseline, don't put your data on a blockchain. Put it on things that you can protect, and then baseline the records that you need to connect that need to be consistent with some set of counterparties on a record by record, workflow step by workflow step basis, using this common frame of reference, the mainnet, in that to do that. You don't have to use a public blockchain. You can use a variety of different things. And in fact, we do this every day. This is not a new pattern. Every enterprise I can think of has partners, and they set up something in the middle, usually to maintain consistency on a set of records. And sometimes they go, it's more advanced, and you get into enterprise service buses and that sort of thing. This is a very basic pattern that says your record and my record need to be verifiably the same. And the workflow step that follows from our record needs to follow the rules from the original record that says, so a master service agreement between you and me, and then a purchase order that the results from that master service agreement that purchase order needs to follow the rules of the master service agreement, and baselining will enforce that. You can't get the PO's proof on the mainnet unless the rules of the MSA were followed. That's a good example. So Timo, have I lost you yet?
No, I'm still here. This is all good. It's all good. So
I will say that the baseline project started with a prototype called Radish 34, which is in the package in the baseline in the repo, which is at github.com/ethereum-oasis/baseline. And that project was about procurement, and procurement has a lot of forgiveness about how fast things happen, right? Today, that if you can get somebody to clear a purchase order in under a day, you're doing pretty well. So from that perspective, it's not like we need a ton of speed, low latency, or that sort of thing. And so that was a pretty good place to start. IoT has some different requirements. So in this case, right? Yeah. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the problems that you're seeing where a machine one controlled by company A needs to be in a state of verifiable consistency with machine two, and that is controlled by company B. Does that pattern sound like, does that remind you of anything in the IoT space in your experience?
Yes, it's daily problems. So, absolutely. I mean, we are looking at the. I mean, obviously the device, the node ID is the key here, and you have so many different device models and different protocols, HTTP and MQTT, CoAP, and which dictate how the devices are configured, and that's usually the LAN side is the bottleneck on IoT in Japan still. So we are in a quite good situation.
What's the bottleneck? You for me, you broke up. I didn't hear what you said. The bottleneck. What?
Hello.
Yeah, Timo, you broke up when you said what was the bottleneck? I want to make sure I heard that correctly.
It usually still the bottleneck is LAN local area networks. What are the protocols? How devices, the sensors or the leaf devices or nodes, how do they connect? Usually the connectivity is always on. So we are quite competent in that area, so we can provide the kind of node network to servers, any protocol, any so that's kind of a strength, and some manufacturer we have come kind of I wouldn't say system integrator. In many cases, we come to clients on the connectivity part. So we are not a system in the manufacturer, but we are looking at this providing this solution from our clients are manufacturers, Japanese manufacturers, OEMs, mobile carriers, energy companies, building owners.
Hey, Timo, just so you know, keep going, but
Yeah.
I want you to know that your sound is pretty bad. So we're only getting maybe every other word. But the words we're getting are pretty good.
Okay. So what you mentioned is this. Okay, if you talk about
Now it's getting worse.
building owner. Yeah, I should just.
And we lost him. Oh, shucks. That sounded like it was going to be really kind of quite interesting. See, Lee is joined. Tom is joined. Huck from who just published a really interesting paper on Medium. Huckleberry Hopper. We have Dermot O'Brien and Nick Kritikos. Timo's back.
Yes, hi everyone, and hi, John. John, first, thanks so much for doing these Q&As. I know they're probably quite time-consuming you, but I think they're very valuable for everyone and for the community. So first, thank you for that. And it's amazing to see how large this community has gotten in such a short time period. So, great job on that. I had a question, if that's okay. Regarding IoT, which we've been discussing, if a IoT vendor wanted to integrate with baseline so that they're baseline ready, meaning so that their system could be used with other systems that are also baseline ready, does that IoT vendor need to wait for a third party in order to integrate with, or is there any is it possible for them to get to a stage that they're baseline ready for those future integrations, or really is it do they need to kind of wait for the third party partner first? And my question is really around the kind of the chicken and the egg. Do you have to wait for those two parties, or is there something that they can do to get to that state of being baseline ready? And sorry, while I was talking, I noticed that Timo jumped back in. So sorry to interrupt you, Timo.
No problem. Please go ahead.
I'll just answer Dermot's question, Timo, and then we can go back to you. By the way, I turned off the my feed to the Zoom. So if anybody else is watching Zoom, I'm not seeing your questions right now, just to make sure that it wasn't on my end that we're losing good sound. Yeah, so Dermot, I think that the answer is that you don't really connect to baseline, right? You can make your product baseline capable or baseline compliant. I think as we get a standard that's proper, it'll be baseline compliant, right? And that just means that any baseline-able thing is baselineable with any other thing that's baselineable. So I would love to see, and I think this is, given the feedback we've been getting from folks, likely that you'll see hey, Mongo is now one-click baselineable, and SAP is one-click baselineable, and that just means that the components and the configuration of those components in those various products have what they need to make it easy for you to take a record and make it consistent with somebody else's record, right? Using the mainnet. So the answer is kind of yes, you do. It doesn't really make it, there's no point in connecting to or making your system baseline enabled if there aren't counterparties that you want to work with. But you can certainly enable your system to receive and be part of any baseline work group without actually having to get a bunch of different companies together to start. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, it does. It was actually my question. It's Noah Apple from Morpheus Network. It would also be great at some point, to be able to have a listing on the Baseline Protocol website to show all these services and companies which are baseline ready.
That would be a great idea. And as I think as we get into the summer and into the fall, and there are real implementations of the standard, there is a page where the companies that are okay with being known. There's a lot of companies that are not yet okay with being known to be being involved. Mainly because we still live in a world where just the word mainnet can scare a senior executive, and we're working very hard to get folks over that. In fact, I just was writing the other night sort of the manifesto, the most boring manifesto ever written, which is, hey, we're IT people and we see use for this, and no, we don't have to be about, cryptocurrency speculation to be to use a mainnet in an appropriate, safe, and effective way. And if we can all say that over and over again, then maybe people will be a little more confident getting involved in things in an open way going forward. And that is the goal. But Noam, your point about, I actually, we're about to announce Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics, and SAP integration, which was done by a bunch of companies, Unibright, Envision Blockchain, Provide, which is this really sharp, small company that's just doing amazing work, and with advisement from LimeChain and Microsoft Dynamics itself. Unibright created the connectors to SAP, and Envision and ported that to Dynamics, as I understand it, and Provide created a deployment platform. So all those, that was a really good example of working together as a team across many companies. And that'll be coming out end of this week or next week. Shall we get, so Timo, you want to go back to, I'd love to hear more about your experiences with IoT. You were getting onto something and then we lost your signal.
Yes, so again, the challenges, at least in Japan, are still on the land side. The clients usually want to use MQTT instead of REST. So obviously, most of the mobile carriers want to use REST. But so there's lots of like protocol challenges in Japan, especially on the land side, but also on the WAN side. So we have quite good position in Japan. So we have helped many companies in energy and smart buildings and some logistics applications as well in those areas. Again, how to get the data, so we help to get that analog data and transfer it to, we basically have a protocol translation system where basically any sensor, we can get the data from any sensor to any cloud, basically. So we want to integrate this to baseline somehow. So that's a kind of like, we're looking at this as a baseline, as a one possible option to kind of move forward, and that's why we are talking now. So
right. So let's talk
I'm
about.
I'm complete novice on blockchain. So
right. The good thing about baselining is that you don't really have to be an expert about blockchain, but because we're just using the blockchain as a form of middleware. So it's really about the problem and the solution you're trying to work on. And in this case, it sounds like, let's talk about, you said smart buildings and logistics. Which one would you rather talk about right now?
Probably smart buildings. So we have some real use cases already there.
So let's talk about those use cases, or specifically, what are the problems that, there are a lot of problems, like, getting the data is always a problem, and that's just hard work, and there isn't any magic technology for that, right? Mm-hmm. Getting the data is getting the data. Dealing with LAN and MQTT versus REST. I'm quite interested in seeing how we might engineer some orchestration between MQTT and other protocols and the baseline protocol. I think they do, very different things, but they're in the same category of stuff. So what is it in buildings? Where do you need to have a consistency, a verifiable consistency of records between some set of data in company A and some set of data in company B?
Yes, maintenance contracts.
Contracts?
Maintenance contracts.
Maintenance contracts. So say more about that. That now you got me really interested. Oh, I hope we didn't lose you.
No, I'm still here.
Cool.
Well, with the maintenance contract, you typically have service level agreements, right? Response times, settlement times, that sort of thing, in addition to potentially who incurs the cost, depending on if it's a warranty issue or a non-warranty issue, that kind of thing, right, Timo?
Yes, exactly. So, one building owner might have 3,000 office buildings scattered all around Japan, and they have several suppliers for HVAC and smart meters and so on. And obviously the building owner wants to have control over the maintenance contracts, but instead the manufacturers have those maintenance contracts under their control. So we're trying to find a way to kind of devise a system where we can be a neutral kind of data transport layer from any node to any cloud, and basically manage that data flow, not to store the data, but manage the data flow in a kind of distribution platform from any device to any cloud, and then add perhaps baseline in that, and then focus on providing a solution for the maintenance contracts for the building owners. That's one of the ideas. But
that's pretty interesting.
That's
so, for example, would this be a workflow scenario? You establish a maintenance contract. You've got 3,000 office buildings, and you've got a whole bunch of different maintenance contracts. You're a building owner. You don't control those. The manufacturers do. So you've got each contract is controlled by a different HVAC vendor, right? These have smart meters on them now, which means they have data going into the HVAC vendor, correct?
Yeah, sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. So.
Oh, rats. I was just reading a story about how the internet is holding up well under all of this strain, and right after I've read it, I've started noticing all sorts of internet troubles. So hopefully we're not entering a new era or a new period of COVID trouble with the internet. What I was saying is, and Nick, maybe you can help me out, is that you have an HVAC vendor.
Apologize. We'll see you next week.
You lost too? Okay. You still there, Timo?
Yeah, still here.
Yeah, so in this case, you have an HVAC vendor that is receiving data from their machine that's on site in the building, right? And this building owner might have 3,000 different office buildings.
Right, and they have different HVAC vendors, and they have different service providers, and those OEMs might be tied up with different SIers and so on. So it's a complete spaghetti from the building owner perspective.
So you have the, actually, I think this might have a baseline pattern to it. So you have a situation where who gets the data from the telemetry of the HVAC, because that's important, right? In terms of triggering a warranty event or maintenance event, it's coming off of the data from that smart meter, right?
Yes.
And who gets that?
Exactly.
The HVAC vendor?
At the moment, it's the HVAC vendor.
Yeah. So they're running some kind of database that's receiving that telemetry from the HVAC.
Yes, that's
Okay.
I think that's the kind of main case. There are other cases as well, but probably this is most common, that the manufacturer control the device, not the building
Right.
owner where the device is installed.
And so I'm guessing that some of the issues around the contracts have to do with disputes about whether or not the vendor is adhering to the contract, or that they're responding correctly to events that are coming off the telemetry of that stack, right?
Right.
And so the building owner wants his or her own database, right, with
Right.
those events.
Yes. Yes.
But that would lose control for the HVAC vendor.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you don't want to put that all on a blockchain, because neither the HVAC vendor nor the office owner wants the whole world to be seeing how much what's going on with their building systems, right?
Right. Yes.
And you don't want to put that on a common private blockchain, because or would that just become a new silo?
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. So in this case, yeah, you could say you could baseline that HVAC vendor's system such that the data is coming off of that stack and then getting messaged to the building owner's baseline system. And I know that one company in the baseline community, Provide, in fact, is building this minimally viable product for small companies. So say you're a small building owner and you just don't do enough volume, and you don't really have an IT staff, or even enough to you don't even know how to do a cloud. You would get a contract like by DocuSign. You'd click the DocuSign, and then you'd be able to click into getting a system of record sort of instantly for $9.95 a month or whatever, that would allow you to get those baseline records into your own hands. So, particularly for somebody that doesn't really know what an API is or what blockchain is or anything like that, you just want to go click, and now pay $9.95 a month for your baseline data.
Mm.
Right. So do all your building owners have systems of record too?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, we are basically this is more like we're at the stage where there's just so many proof of concepts, but it's difficult to find the kind of scale. And Japanese companies typically are very conservative. They're careful to start, and in most cases, the system integrators are kind of in control of these projects. Because
that's a good thing in this case.
Yeah, I suppose.
Because, that's a good thing here, because you don't have to negotiate 24 months to create some kind of POC for a consortium. You can do it one company at a time, or a couple of companies at a time, and a system integrator can make some money doing it, right?
Right.
So this pattern is good for situations here is where you're working with traditional vendors and they don't want to get cut out, but you want to radically improve the situation for all of them. And
right.
This is a good example, right? If the HVAC vendor is using SAP, that's more SAP. If they're using some other kind of system, it's more for that system, because you're not getting rid of that system and moving it all to a blockchain. You're using that system and increasing its ability to not only know what you know, but know on a record by record basis what your counterparties know also, without getting into their systems and knowing too much about them. So in this case, you could say, well, I have an event. I've got this new event coming off of the HVAC where the vendor, the HVAC vendor, can say, I don't want to give away all my data. I want that data for me, right? But I am going to allow the customer to get a baseline message that this happened. And now you have, and that's going to go into their database. If they don't have a database, that was why I was asking, if they don't have a database or a system of record like an ERP already, then I anticipate some services coming up that would give them the ability to have that very quickly and cheaply. So let's assume that you're building up, if I have 3,000 office buildings, I probably have an IT department, right? And I probably have an ERP system of some kind.
Probably.
Right. So yeah, so then you would baseline with that system. And now the HVAC vendor and the building owner have the same event. And if that event is following another, a previous event where you set up a work group that said, here's our SLA, here's our contract, and here's our business logic for governing what happens with different events, right? Then that new event will trigger that. And it will, and then you can build the business logic in that says this must happen, right? HVAC vendor must fix this thing in this amount of time, and you can enforce that. And most importantly, and this is kind of a boring, it's a boring problem, but a big one, which is repudiation. You can, the vendor and the building owner and anybody else that needs to be consistent cannot, nobody can say, well, I didn't get the memo, I didn't get the message. I didn't receive that telemetry. Everybody received the telemetry. Everybody knows, everybody signed off on what the agreement is, and everybody, and you can't proceed from one workflow step to another without adhering to those rules, right? So the newest workflow step simply will not be able to put its proof on the workflow's blockchain, what we call a shield contract, without being compliant with the agreement. Is that does that sound right to you?
Yes.
So yeah, that sounds, and that's a good example of something where you don't have to have lightning speed off of your blockchain component, because blockchains are slow. Even the private blockchain is slow. And don't let anybody tell you different. They'll say, oh, we do 100,000 transactions a second, but when you hook it up to an actual data layer, it goes down to 100 transactions. People will say a lot of stuff, but blockchains are by definition slower than their counterparts that don't have to maintain consensus. That's a law of physics, I think. So they can be, some can be faster or some can be slower, but it is not, blockchains are not built for speed. That's not what you use them for. So some IoT systems require crazy speed. This one I don't think does. In terms of in terms of finality, when you do need crazy speed, then our answer is you use systems that give you that speed, like MQTT, like any number of other systems. And then you put in you baseline at a step up from there, so that it's kind of a slower gear, right? But that gear basically makes sure that all the different systems are in a state of consistency over time.
Right. Right. That's interesting. So I think consensus, you guys have some partners in Japan already, right?
I think so.
I think was some press release on I think Hitachi Solutions, I think.
Right on.
Right.
Yeah, Hitachi's awesome. I'm not personally involved with that, and Consensus is getting to be a pretty big company, so I
Yeah.
can't speak to it directly, but it doesn't
Right.
sound right. So that's, I think we're a few minutes after the bottom. Everybody, Timo, it's been great talking to you. I hope everybody got something out of that. It's a bit of a ramble. I'm sorry for the technical problems. But it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of interesting opportunity in IoT. I'm not an IoT expert, so it's really great to see people with specifics in that space and say, okay, yeah, here's a building owner. Here's the problem they have. This maintenance contract is we could probably get into a lot more detail, maybe offline. But clearly there are issues that could be that sounds like you were very much in agreement, right? That consistency is a problem.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I can see some opportunities there.
Interesting.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry for the technical problems, but hopefully the internet will be back on its feet next week.
Thanks
Thank
a
you,
lot.
everyone.
That's very interesting.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks.